Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 181, recorded live Monday, December 9th, 2013. I am your host, and well into the holiday spirit, Todd Klindt. I'm rocking the Santa hat. I'm wearing the most awesome Christmas sweater here. I know you're all jealous. I should probably start selling these things on my my website or something. And while the folks at Rackspace have done a lot for me, they got me that monitor, the flag, the fancy microphone. They did not pay for this. This is not a Rackspace special. But they do some great stuff, and you can find out about all the great stuff that Rackspace does. You can go to sharepoint.rackspace.com. I know they've had some like Cyber Monday deals on training and things like that. And so go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com. It's always new stuff. We got a guy whose job it is to make that site not suck. His name is Justin, and so if that site does suck, you can get a hold of Justin. But we're always putting new stuff out there, so check it out. Go early, go often, to sharepoint.rackspace.com. Next, our production notes. Production notes have gone pretty smooth. Got the RSS feed up a little late. Got that up yesterday or the day before, I forget, but I'm doing better. And so sorry to you folks that on that. Probably next year, I think probably when we start 2014, I'm going to collapse the audio and video feeds and maybe move those around a little bit. Before I do that, I need to remember my logins for the iTunes store and the Zune Marketplace, so I can go in there and fix those too. But I'll probably be jiggling those around. So if you use the RSS feed, keep an eye out for that. If I do move the RSS feeds around, I will make sure that I leave one video or audio at the tail end telling you that, so at least you'll download the last one and know to check your stuff. But that will be probably happening next year. And if I do that, the reason that I do that is because it'll speed things up. I'll collapse them and put them in one spot, make production a little easier for me. And the easier things are for me, the better off it is for you guys. All right, so like I've been talking about a little in the chat room, so for those of you who listen to this, download it and don't listen to it live, about, well, not tonight because I'm late, but normally about 30 minutes, maybe an hour before I go on the air, I open up the chat room and I get in there, we chat and we talk about stuff and everybody makes fun of me and it's all very nice. But I was talking about how I've actually been off work the last 2 weeks. My wife had a baby a couple weeks ago, and Rackspace, being the awesome folks that they are, they give us paternity leave when we get 2 weeks of paternity leave. So because of that, I haven't been doing any SharePoint, or been doing very little SharePoint for the last couple of weeks. So the previous episode and this one will probably be a little shorter. But that's okay. You know, it's a holiday season. You guys got stuff. You're listening to Christmas music, watching the Grinch on TV. So it's okay, but that's why things are going to be a little shorter this week. The first thing that I wanted to mention is something that I mentioned last week, but it is so cool that it bears repeating. I have my own app in the Windows Phone App Store. You can download that, and if you go to toddklint.com/download Win Phone App, it will take you to the page in the market, and you can hit install and push it out to your phone. Or you can just go to your market on your phone and search for my name. You'll see my Netcast in there, and you'll also see this app as well. But if you download that app, and let me show it to you. I know you're all wondering what it looks like. You're all very excited about it. So if you go out to the store, you can find it. I'm not going to make you watch for that. But then it shows up. It'll show up in your little list there as the Todd Klindt thing. And ignore the Todd Klindt beneath that because it's my email. Don't click that. It's very exciting. But when you bring up the app, it does this. And it's going to give you a little about screen about me. I said it'll give you a little about screen about me. Oh, geez. My app's broken. Holy cow. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. All right. So it's a little welcome screen. Nobody cares about that. But what it's cool for is it's got a page that's got all my blog posts. So when I blog new blog posts, it will show up on your phone. And when I push out new netcasts, those also go out there on the app as well. And then I've got some links in there a link to my blog, link to the SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013 build numbers, and I get this request all the time. It's kind of embarrassing, but then it's got a whole tab full of eye candy, pictures of me, suitable for framing, all that. And then it's got a tab for upcoming events. So you can see if you're going to go to Tech Ed in Houston, you're like, gosh, I wonder if Todd's going to that. I'd love to see his stuff. Well, you've got a list of all the events that I'm going to go to. And then there's a link to the events. So if you're not going to the event and you see, wow, that whole SharePoint conference thing, that looks pretty interesting. Tell me more about that. You can actually click it and it'll take you to the event. So we got that. So a couple other things in there. I've got some ideas. It's got a tile, but the live tile just cycles through pictures. Right now, the live tile doesn't show you when there's new blog posts, things like that. But hopefully, I can get somebody who is a Windows Phone developer, hint, hint, to get a hold of me, and maybe we can add that stuff in. I would love to have that so you could have the live tile there. And then as I blog new things and produce new netcasts, it will show up on there. You can click it. I know that's very exciting for a lot of you people. It's the whole reason you have these phones and all that is to get those things. So, and like I mentioned, there's some things that I'm looking to do to it, but if you've got suggestions, things that you wish the Windows Phone app did, give me a shout. You can email me at phoneapp@toddklindt.com. I've got an account set up for that. And then, if it's something that I can add, that would be awesome. I would like to make it better. And if you do download the app, do me a favor and go out and add a review. Even if it's not a great review, though, I don't know how it wouldn't be. But go out there and add a review because that helps to show up in search rankings and things like that. Right now, if you search for Todd in the Windows App Store, I'm not the first hit. We need to fix that, people. We need to get my name to the top. So adding reviews helps solve that. Okay, so and the other thing I wanted to mention is that app is completely free and worth every penny. Completely free, and you get your money's worth. All right, speaking of free, Microsoft has done it again. They have released another cool free ebook that I wanted to pass along. And this one is not necessarily about SharePoint, but it's about System Center and about cloud management with System Center R2. And System Center has kind of become Microsoft's, well, they're calling it like their cloud management suite now. A bunch of us can remember how System Center originally was the Microsoft Operations Manager, or MOM, and then it became System Center Operation Manager, or SCOM, and then System Center became all these other things, App Manager, or Orchestrator, or Scorch. I hate it when you call it Scorch. But System Center is this whole suite of things right now. And you can use it for a bunch of things. You can use it to manage virtualization. You can use it to monitor SharePoint. You can use all kinds of stuff. And this is a free ebook on cloud management with App Controller. And I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of that stuff because that's what the book is for. But it's got 5 chapters that you can use. You can read on it. It's free. It's free in PDF. It's free in Mobi. And it's free in EPUB. So if you have so obviously everybody's got something that reads PDFs. PDFs aren't great for books, though, because you can't resize and things like that. So Mobi and EPUB are out there. And myself, I have a Kindle, and I don't have it with me right here, but I have a Kindle Paperwhite, and the Mobi format is the Amazon format. So that works pretty well. And what I did is I downloaded the .mobi file, and then if you go out to Amazon and manage your devices for your Kindle, every Kindle that you have on your account has an email address. And you can email documents to that, and it will push them down to your Kindle. So I did that, and that will work with any files under 50 meg. So this one comes in like 42, something like that. So I got the Mobi and just emailed it to my Kindle. The next time I went to my Kindle, it was synced there. It was pretty great. So Ellis from Philly, he's in the chat room, and you guys remember a couple weeks ago I talked about some stuff that Ellis did. Ellis wants to know if somebody will print it out and mail it to me. Yes, Ellis, they will, for $9.99 on that same URL. You can order a print version. So yes, a little something for everybody. But that's great. Now, when I was doing this, I downloaded that Mobi and then a couple other things. But getting books onto the Kindle is super easy. Now, you can also just plug it in with the USB cord and copy it over. But then it's not in the Amazon Cloud thing and things like that. Mark in the chat room mentions Calibre. Calibre is another great program that you can buy that you can use to manage what's on your Kindle and set up collections and remove DRM and all that kind of stuff. Myself, I try to do whatever I can without actually attaching a device to anything. Like, I don't want to have to plug my phone in to sync it. I don't want to plug my Kindle in, and so the email thing works well. Also, and I don't have a link for it, but Amazon has a Send to Kindle app you can install on Windows, and then any document that you right-click on that Kindle understands, there'll be a Send to Kindle thing, and they'll just zip it up and send it to your Kindle. So, pretty nice, but free ebooks and the System Center thing for us SharePoint folks, specifically us IT pros and all that, the System Center thing is important to know. The whole managing clouds thing is going to be important to us because all of our SharePoint servers, our delicate little SharePoint servers are going to be in there. So understanding how that works, even if we can't do it, but having a good understanding of how it works is only going to help us. So glad that Microsoft's doing that, sending out those free ebooks. So as I see more of those kind of things, I'll pass them along. You guys are good people. I like to hook you up. Okay, so the next three topics that I've got going on here are kind of related. I got a theme. I had a couple of these, and then I just kind of got going. And actually, I wanted to find one from a month or so ago that I wanted to add there. Oh, where's it at? I might have to come back and look for that. I'm looking through my own notes now. That's oh, there it is. Okay. Add that in. But I noticed a couple of things come across, downloads and white papers and stuff like that about search. And so I thought this would be a good show to just talk about some cool things you can do with search. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is a search query tool. And this is something, this particular tool has not been around forever because this is for SharePoint 2013, but there have been tools like this around for search since SharePoint 2007. And it is a tool that is a standalone app. So this one you can go to sp2013searchtool.codeplex.com. And this is a standalone executable that you point at SharePoint, and it will do queries for you, but instead of getting a search page back, you get the raw results back. So you get the thing back that SharePoint sends to the the search results page, and then it does all its stuff with the refiners and all that kind of stuff. Well, now you're getting that raw data back, and it is invaluable for troubleshooting, invaluable. So I'll give you a good example. I had a customer who had documents that they could not find, see if I can get this correct, they could not find documents from a file share unless they searched for words that were in the content of the file. So if they had a file share that was a content source, they could not do a query on those by file name. So like if they knew that there was a file called Doug is a Stinker, but it didn't actually contain the word Doug anywhere in the document, it just referred to him as he or the Stinker. If they went out and did a query for Doug, the document wouldn't show up. But if they did a query for the contents of the file, it would show up. So this was a thing that I had. I think this was SharePoint 2010 that I had this problem. And what turned out to be the problem was there was a bug with that version of SharePoint. And when the indexer pulled that file across the wire, it saved it locally, and it gave it a temporary name, and then it was indexing the temporary name. And that's why you couldn't do queries on the file name. Now that was something that was impossible for me to figure because then it brought it into the index and I couldn't see it. But I used a 2007 or 2010 version of this tool, did a query that I knew would result in that file, and then I could see all of the properties, and that's where I saw the crazy file name, and then it all fell together what was happening, filed a bug, and got it all fixed. But tools like this are great for troubleshooting search and just seeing what's out there, and you've got all kinds of knobs that you can twist and buttons you can push, how many results you want, which page of results, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's been a great tool. I haven't used this particular one, but I saw somebody mention it in another discussion, so I thought I would pass it on to you guys. So I've been thinking about putting together a blog post of just SharePoint tools that I use, and if I do end up doing that, this is one of them that I'll have in my toolkit, because when it comes to troubleshooting search, just seeing that raw search stuff and seeing what's in there, you know, the rankings and all that kind of stuff is a very valuable thing. So I thought I would pass that one along, and thanks to the folks that were talking about that before and reminded me of it. Okay. So this is interesting. So in the chat room, Doug is in the chat room right now. Doug, that is the stinker, and he said that stinker and dev are synonyms because Doug is the token developer that I allow in the chat room. That dovetails directly into my next topic that I wanted to talk about, and that is how to create a thesaurus, custom thesaurus file for SharePoint Search. So this is another one of those things I saw some people discuss and stuff, and I don't remember where it was. Twitter, Yammer, Instagram, I don't remember, Tumblr, one of those places. But this is a method that you can use to define synonyms inside of search. So the example that they give in the article here is if you've got a document called Cup of Joe, which is, you know, a common euphemism for a cup of coffee, and it's got all kinds of stuff about coffee in there. But if you do a search for coffee, it doesn't show up because, you know, it's not in there. So this is a really simple way you can just fire up Notepad, and you can create a CSV file where you map words to what their synonyms are. So the columns are key, which is the word that you want, in this case coffee. Synonym, that column is whatever the other words you want to include are. And so this example has cup of Joe. You might want to put Java, you know, something like that, maybe latte if you really want to broaden the search terms. And then the third column is the language, because search does a bunch of languages, and you need to use the two-letter abbreviation for the language. So in our case, it's EN, because I live in America. I only speak one language. And you can have multiple synonyms for the same key. So you create all that just in a regular text file, and you just create a comma separated file, save that out as something.csv, and then you got to get it into SharePoint some way. And the way that you get it into SharePoint is with our friend PowerShell. So there is now a PowerShell commandlet, import SP Enterprise Search Thesaurus, where you can import that thesaurus into your search service application, and then once the search service application chunks through that and chunks through the index, then when you search for any of those synonyms, it will also search. It will search for all of it. So if you search for coffee, it will also give you the results for Cup of Joe. Now, a couple of notes about this. You can only import one CSV file. So if you have multiple terms that you want to make sure are thesaurused correctly, you need to have them in one file. You can't pull in a coffee thesaurus and then a computer term thesaurus or anything like that. It needs to be one file, because when you do the import, it overwrites whatever's there. The other thing that's important to know about this is that you can't export. So when you create that CSV file and you import it into SharePoint, keep that CSV file around, because as you tweak this and as you add more of these, you're going to, you know, tag them onto the end of that and then re-import that whole thing because it overwrites. The other thing is that this is search service specific. So if you're in one of those weird cases where you have multiple search service applications, you'll need to do this for both of them, or just understand that it's going to be different between them. But that's a cool thing, and then this is another one of those things that I did a bunch of times in previous versions of SharePoint, and that was really popular. And one of them, I didn't do this myself, but one of my friends did. He was at a company that had a really cruddy HR department, and they really wanted to just suck the fun out of everything, SharePoint included. And so what they did was they ended up creating a synonym file that had all of the bad words that they didn't want everybody to have in their documents. And then they would do if anybody did a query well, and so they set up the synonym file for all of the bad words, and then they made it a synonym for code of conduct, and then they had a best bet for the code of conduct, so that if anybody searched for any bad words, it would also give them a search results for the code of conduct, and then the code of conduct was a best bet across the top to remind them that they shouldn't be searching for those words. And that clever, but just sucking the fun right out of everything. But again, the method for getting this into previous versions of SharePoint, there was a specific file in the file system that you had to tweak, and it was kind of ugly. Now there's actually a commandlet for it, and it's very helpful. The help tells you how to create the file and all that kind of stuff. So Doug in the chat room is asking me for some examples of the bad words. It's like he's trying to trick me into using curse words. Earlier in the chat room, they asked what rating this netcast is at. I try to keep it PG, but yes, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to indulge that. Oh, jeez. So that was an interesting one, and again, that's the search is a little different in 2013. So it's good to see some of these things pulling forward. Jeff in the chat room is saying that one of the, and this is a comment, I've actually heard this before, that as time has progressed, the antivirus and anti-malware and all those things kind of mold together into content scanning, and one of the things that they scan for is profanities. And he said that, so Jeff in the chat room is saying that McAfee Portal Shield had a default XML file that had the things that they were looking for, and he said he learned a few things. And I've definitely heard that. I've worked at places where there was, the person who ran the antivirus stuff also ran the content screening and would have to search for these things and add these things. And some days I thought they had a really awesome job, and some days would have been rough to get behind a monitor seeing some of the things that they saw. But that was a good one, and there's just all kinds of great things you can do with that. Lori in the chat room is talking about how one company used it to mask another company's name to get it out of there. It synonymmed it out as a bad word. A lot of things we can do. The next one that I wanted to talk about, this is a good document, and this came out here not too long ago. Well, the 26th, that was 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And this is a document that is best practices for crawling in SharePoint 2013. And this is an awesome document. I think everybody who installs SharePoint 2013 and creates a search service application should have to read this document before they do it. It has got some great things in there. Some of it's common sense. Some of it is stuff that I already knew. But some of it is new stuff. And I'm not going to go through every bullet point, but there are some really great low-hanging fruit things that I wanted to talk about. One of them was, and this was a new one to me, when you create your search service application, and I've got, I've got a list of things that I do when I install SharePoint 2013. I keep threatening to blog that, and I haven't yet, but one of the things is I create my content web apps and things like that before I create search. And then when you create search, it adds all of those into a default content source called local SharePoint sites. And that includes all of your web apps, so HTTP portal, HTTP my sites, whatever. And it also creates your also as your people search. So you'll see an entry in there that's SPS3, that's SharePoint Profile Search 3, and that is your my site host URL, and that's where it gets all your user information. So one of the things that this document has is they recommend breaking the people search into its own content source and crawling it first. So, create your web apps, create your user profile service, create your sync connection, do one sync, get your users in there, and then create search. And before you run any queries or run any crawls, go into search, Windows, go into search and crawl your people search first before you crawl any of your content. Now, the reason that they give for that is because when the people search happens, search takes all that stuff and takes the names and starts figuring out all the permutations. So there's that thing that, if you search for Bill, you'll get William, and if you've got somebody like Lori where there's 2 or 3 different ways to spell their name, it will figure all that out. But the idea is to do the people search first and then do the content search, so that the people search has a couple hours, and here they say 2 hours, has a couple hours to do all that mucking around with the names, so that when it does the content search, it can do all that fancy stuff out of the chute when it does the results. So that was kind of interesting that they have those set up as separate content sources. Another thing that they talk about is using continuous crawl to ensure fresh search results. Now, the continuous crawl is a new thing in SharePoint 2013, and that is this idea that you could have incremental crawls before that ran, very frequently, every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes, whatever. I guess it was every 15. But continuous crawls work even better. And there's a few things for that. One of the reasons was if you had an incremental crawl, and let's say you had your incremental crawl set for every 15 minutes, and somebody goes in and dumps just a ton of documents in, a ton of new documents, as quickly as they can in that 15 minutes. And because of that, your incremental crawl takes more than 15 minutes. Well, then somebody, after that 15-minute mark, uploads a couple more documents. That incremental crawl is going to run. If it runs more than 15 minutes, then the next incremental crawl is not going to start, because you can't have 2 incremental crawls running at the same time. So if that first incremental crawl takes 16 minutes, there's going to be no crawling done for the next 14 minutes. Now, that doesn't seem like a huge deal unless you've got but if you've got a wider increment, it gets bad. So one of the ways a continuous crawl is better is you could have multiple continuous crawls happening at once. So if you have an incremental crawl set for every 15 minutes, potentially a poorly behaving incremental crawl can prevent the next one from starting, because it doesn't start late, it just doesn't start. With a continuous crawl, no matter what, the next one's going to start. And you can reduce that frequency from 15 minutes. You can make it shorter. Another thing is that incremental crawls will try harder to find things that have errored out, things that don't show up, you don't have permission, things like that. The continuous crawl will just dump those things after 3 failed attempts, so it just goes faster. So that's one of the things that they mention, and they have a link to how to manage continuous crawl, so there's some things in there. I was going to mention something else about continuous crawl. I just lost it. That's what it is. So continuous crawl sounds great, and it is great. I'm a big fan, but you have to pay for it. You have to give it your pound of flesh. And the continuous crawl, when you flip that switch, just make sure that the machine that's running your indexing is not overworked, because continuous crawl will add more workload to it, and make sure that the things that you're crawling are not overworked, because continuous crawl will crawl them more aggressively. So make sure that you know what you're doing, because you can take some things down with continuous crawl if you're not careful. This is another one, and I kind of got bit with this one my darn self within the last month, and it's something that I've kind of known, but this document does a better job of explaining it. And this is that SharePoint Search is happiest and most agreeable if you crawl the default zone URL. And that's something that I, as a general rule, would do anyway. When you set it up, I mean, it happens out of the box, and I try to do as many things on the default zone URL as possible. But there is a place where it gets tricky. Because there's kind of, at least the way I've always thought of, there's 2 golden rules with SharePoint Search. Always have it search the default zone URL, and always have it crawl a URL that uses NTLM. But the problem becomes, if your default zone URL is not NTLM, which one of those immovable objects do you move? And so this document explains how to handle this and what things to do. So what it comes down to is, if search is crawling the default zone URL, and you have other zones like you have extranet or intranet or whatever, if you crawl the default zone URL, then when a user does a query, search will make the results match whatever zone they're coming from. So if it crawls default and everything, gets all that stuff, but I come in from the extranet URL. Maybe it's because there's a different authentication provider or whatever. But if I come into the extranet URL, then when search gives me my results, it's going to give me back the URLs with the extranet URL. And then if somebody else comes in with the intranet zone, because they're using a different authentication provider, coming over a different network link or something, when they do a query for the same documents, they'll get links to the intranet zone, which is great because that's what they're coming in as. But that only works if you crawl the default zone URL. If you crawl a different zone, like if you crawl extranet instead, because maybe the default zone has some crazy SAML claims provider that it's using, and so you create an extranet zone and use NTLM on that. If you crawl the extranet zone, then no matter where somebody comes from, their results are going to be for the extranet zone. And so, I mean, I knew before that you should crawl the default zone URL, and I knew that if you had multiple zones, search would do a pretty good job of figuring out, but I didn't know all the specifics behind it as to which one you would get if you crawled the wrong one. So they give some great examples on that. They talk about, you know, SSL and things like that. So that's a good one on there. Another piece that they cover a little bit is how to reduce the effect crawling has on your targets. And that target can be, you know, your web servers. That can be your SQL server that's doing your processing, all that kind of stuff. So we talk about crawler impact rules, things like that. And so that's good stuff to learn. Another one is, this is something that a lot of people don't think about, and for SharePoint it can get kind of tricky, is that you should use Active Directory groups for security as much as possible. And the reason for that is because when you change permissions on something, then that makes search do a more vigorous crawl on it to make sure it gets all the security stuff. So if you give permission to an Active Directory group and then add or remove people from that, from a search standpoint, the permissions don't change because, you know, obviously search has to worry about security trimming. But if you add individual users and their SIDs are popping in and out, then search has to work harder. So if you use Active Directory groups, that's better. Talks about how to add more crawl components, things like that. Some health diagnostic stuff. So there's just a bunch of good stuff. And the document's not very long, and it's got some links to other stuff. But if you're an administrator, and I've always said that search is one of the best parts of SharePoint, and that's all the way back to SharePoint 2007. Search is just for intranet stuff. SharePoint Search is a killer. And the other thing is, search is a great way to win people over to SharePoint. I've done that on multiple occasions, and I almost feel bad for them a little bit. You go into a company, and you've normally got one or two people that are, you know, SharePoint enthusiasts, and they want to bring SharePoint in, but then you've got a bunch of people that don't like it. It's either the accountants because they don't want to pay for it, or, you know, the IT manager because he doesn't want to change stuff, or you've got another group that has some other inferior web platform that they want to use instead. So you got to win over their hearts and minds. I do that all the time with search, and it works like a champ. Again, I almost think it's not fair that because they can't resist it. So I'll do things like add custom properties or show refiners or things like that. But I think search is a great way to win people over to SharePoint. But in order for that to work, you got to have search done well. So this document helps you with a lot of that. Another thing, and I talked about this a month and a half ago, is that the October 2013 cumulative update for SharePoint 2013 increased a bunch of search boundaries. And so if you're doing a bunch of heavy search things, get that October 2013 cumulative update in your test environment soon. Test it out. And because it does things like it increases the number of indexers you can have, the number of documents, the number of partitions, all kinds of stuff. And if you go to the SharePoint 2013 software boundaries and limitations document, they have updated all of that. So you'll see, you know, here are the limits for search, this, and this. Unless you've got the October 2013 cumulative update, then it's this, and this. If you're using search heavily, it's good to have that in order. And also there's a bunch of things inside of SharePoint 2013 now that use search. There's the content by search web part, and there's all that kind of stuff. So having search finely tweaked and doing everything right will give you lots and lots of benefits. So good documents. Again, a very search heavy episode tonight, but it was just all those things kind of came at once, and it seemed like some good things to cover. don't worry, folks. We're on the home stretch now. I can see the folks in the chat room. They're getting tired. They're getting weary. We're almost there. We're moving on to the best part of the night, the part that everybody looks forward to, the shameless self-promotion part. Not a lot of changes with this. So first off, if you've got the app for your Windows 8 phone, well, you're already on top of this. You know all the stuff I'm going to say already. But kind of in chronological order, in January, I'm going to the New Media Expo in Vegas, and I'm just going as an attendee. I'm just going to go to learn stuff and hopefully get some ideas on how to make the Netcast better. Always love to hear your guys' ideas, but getting some ideas from the professionals there as well. Then in March, I'm going to this little thing called the SharePoint Conference, and that is going to be at the Venetian Hotel in beautiful and sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, and that is March 3rd through the 6th, but I'm going out a day early, and on March 2nd, I'm going to have a pre-conference session all day long with my sidekick, Shane Young, and it's all going to be installation and configuration. We're going to cover some of the search stuff, and that is an additional $400 on top of the SharePoint conference fee. Now, once we get out there, Microsoft gets us out there. They want their pound of flesh, so I'm going to be doing 3 other sessions. I'm going to be doing one on upgrade. We're going to be doing one on PowerShell with SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint Online. And then finally, we're going to be doing a new one for us, and that's going to be load testing SharePoint 2013 with Visual Studio 2013. So we're going to show you how to take Visual Studio and use its load testing capabilities to pound on your SharePoint farm and see when it breaks and see where it breaks. So we got that. As always, there's going to be a ton of stuff going on at the SharePoint conference. One of the things is going to be we're going to be recording a live version of this Netcast at the SharePoint conference. So if you're going to be at the SharePoint conference, you got to show up for that. I don't know the time when that's going to happen yet, but they've got a studio there they call it SPC TV. I'm going to be doing the show from there, so check that in. As I find that stuff out, I'll update it. So then the next event that I have going on is the next month in April, and that's SP TechCon, and that's in San Francisco, April 22nd through the 25th. And also be doing a Netcast there, be doing some sessions, might be doing a pre-conference session there. I think they talked to Shane last week, but again, I'm off, I'm slacking, so I haven't been checking my email very well, but I think we might be doing something there as well. And as always, if and this goes for the next one too, if you're at one of these conferences, come up and say, hey, I'm a pretty friendly guy, so don't be shy about coming up and saying hello. And then finally, the next month, I'm going to be at Microsoft Tech Ed, and that is May 12th through the 15th in Houston, Texas. And we're going to be doing a pre-conference session there also on installing and configuring SharePoint 2013. And we submitted a bunch of sessions. I don't think they've come back to us and told us what else we're going to be doing. But that's the big Microsoft show, and there's going to be everything there, Windows and SQL and the whole thing. It's going to be a good time. So would love to see any of you at any of these conferences. Again, if you see me or if Rackspace has a booth at some of them, for goodness sakes, come up and say, hey, let me know what sucks about the Netcast, because Lord knows there's plenty of things to talk about that. But would love to say, hey, say hello. So thanks to everybody. If you've got any questions or anything, you can always hit me up on Twitter at Todd Klindt. You can download this at youtube.com/ToddKlindtNetcast. You can go to toddklindt.com/netcast, all that kind of stuff. Jack in the chat room wants to know if they can buy a VW van and follow me around the country. Absolutely. And since you're going to get something that's kind of economical, like the VW van, I'll even pitch in for the gas for some of the stuff. I would absolutely. I encourage the Netcast hooligans to do all that kind of stuff. It's a great group. And as I look in the chat room tonight, I bet at any one point, half of the people in the chat room I've met in person would recognize them on the street. That's a pretty tight group, so I appreciate all that. So thanks to everybody. Hopefully next week we'll have some more content because I'm going back to work this week. But as always, if you've got ideas, give me a shout. Like I said, Twitter, email me, todd.klint@rackspace.com. And if it's something that I want to talk about, I'll throw it on the Netcast. So thanks, everybody, and have a good week.